to you from Austin, Texas on this overcast day. It's Color Commentary, and we're Adrian Gonzalez.
And Michael Petchek. And we didn't have F&M this week.
Right, because of the dangle pre-release, which we are playing in today, though.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to...
2HG.
Yeah, we're playing some Two-Headed Giant. We're gonna crush some face. I don't know. My strategy going into this is open up all of the modules and make a ton of tokens.
Open all the good cards and hope your opponent doesn't open any. The perfect sealed strategy.
Or just crack a Soul Ring and just like turn 3 drop selling stupid.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually hoping to open Steel Overseer or Mox Opal, not because they'll be useful in draft, but because I want them for my Affinity deck.
Steel Overseer is probably actually not bad in this limited environment.
That's true. It's good with servos.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. Yeah.
Let me just throw that your way.
Yeah. Didn't think that one through. I was just thinking like, oh, there's artifacts in this format. It's probably okay. Yeah, that seems very good.
I mean, there are some where like they're not even really that valuable, but I still would play them. I think the cheapest one when I looked last night was Noxious Gearhulk at like $35. I would play a Noxious Gearhulk, regardless of whether or not was a super pimp or not.
I think most of the inventions are all limited playable. So I think if you open one, you just play it.
Yeah.
Like I'm also like notoriously not that great at sealed. I can do draft.
I'm not very good at sealed. We're probably not going to do very well. Let's be honest with ourselves. But we're going to have a lot of fun. There's 2 of us.
Yeah.
Two-headed giant. You know.
Yeah. All right, let's get right into the deck tech because we're actually recording right before we go to the pre-release, and I'm gonna like let the video render while we're out. So like we're under a little bit of a time crunch.
I will say that the episode is gonna be an hour long either way, Mike.
Yes, yes, the episode will be an hour long, but the quicker we can get to our main points, the better. So this week's deck tech is kind of a fringe combo-y deck. Named Watch Rites. And this gets its nickname from 2 cards in it. Keep Watch, which says draw a card for each attacking creature, and Rites of Initiation, which is a red spell that lets you discard at random any number of cards from your hand and give all creatures you control +1/+0 until end of turn.
So the idea is that
you build
up a board of these really tiny creatures, and then in one turn you draw 20 cards, or not. It's never gonna be 20. It's gonna be like 7. Which should be enough.
Yeah.
And then you dump them all and give all your guys +7/+7 and
well, yeah, that's the thing. You got to remember, if you attack with 7 guys, you're getting 7 cards. You're pitching them all for +7/+0, and that adds up to an additional 49 damage. Like, it scales very well.
Yeah.
Turns out exponential functions get out of hand very quickly. So let's start in with the creatures. We got 4 copies of Essence Warden, 1 green. It's a green color shifted Soul Warden.
And I believe that's here just so that you can get some incidental life gain and stay in the game.
Yeah, it's definitely to help stabilize and, keep you above water before your opponent has a chance to really get stuff online. 4 copies of Elvish Visionary. It's a boring old 1/1 that cantrips.
But in this deck, it could be an 8-0.
Yeah.
An 8-1, I mean.
But it cantrips. It gives you another body for the rights or for Keep Watch, and it just helps you build that lethal attack just that little bit quicker. That right. It's a cantrip in green. So, this is technically Temur colors, but it's mostly a green token deck with a combo finish added in.
Right. There's only 1 red spell and 1 blue spell. Well, 4 of each, and it's the Initiation and the Keep Watch. So
yeah. Then we got 4 Nest Invaders. That's the bear that comes with an 0/1.
It's quasi ramp, and it's another dude for Keep Watch Rites of Initiation. So
yeah. Also, keeps you a little safer from edicts if you're trying to keep a Essence Warden alive or something like that. Then we got 4 Sylvan Ranger, 1 in a blue,
1 in a green.
1 in a green. Sorry. When it comes into it's a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you tutor a basic land, put it into the battlefield tapped or hand. I always forget this one.
I'm pretty sure it's hand. I think Wood Elves is the battlefield.
Oh yeah, and that one's only a forest.
Yes.
So yeah, this one just gets you a basic. It also lets you tutor for the Singleton Mountain and the Singleton Island in the deck. So that's probably a large reason why it's in there. Again, it's also just a cheap 1/1 with upside that, is gonna help you get closer to your win condition.
Right. Deck thinning. That's a concept people think about.
Yeah. I mean, in this deck, it's kind of relevant.
Yeah. Well, you also definitely need these other two colors. So
yeah, you definitely in order to have that kind of combo finish, you need a blue or a red source, a blue and a red source actually. Although sometimes with this deck, you just need Rites of Initiation and 4 cards in hand.
Right.
So that is one of the perks of this. You don't need to actually combo out. Sometimes you just play a token deck that incidentally swings for lethal.
Well, let's get to those token makers because there's actually a whole bunch in here.
Oh my god. I didn't look through this deck list before I copied it into our document. This plays Chatter of the Squirrel.
Yeah. So going to spells, we have 4 Abundant Growth, which is an Avacyn Restored, G, enchant a land. It taps for any color now, and you draw a card.
Yep. Again, just kind of cantripping, fixing your mana.
And Mike, why don't you take Chatter of the Squirrel here?
So it's a green. You get a 1/1, and then I believe it flashes back for 1 and a green.
Yeah, then you get another 1/1.
And they are squirrels, a now no longer used creature type because it's quote unquote silly.
Is that what they say?
Yeah.
Is that why they don't let us use orcs either?
I think they just simplified it to goblins so that there's more interaction with established cards. Although there were orcs on Tarkir.
But my Brass Claw orcs.
I don't know what that does, and I don't think I want to.
No, it's old and bad. Next, we have the titular Rites of Initiation, 4 copies. Again, Arth, and dump your hand to give everything plus X plus O, where X is the number of cards you dumped at random.
Well, yeah, that's the other interesting thing. You can dump half your hand. It is
random, though.
It is random. There aren't many situations where you really want to be only dumping half your hand into a Rites, but it shouldn't be ignored that, yes, it is discard any number of cards at random. It's usually all of them.
Next up, we have 4 copies of Prophetic Prism. Get your new Kaladesh foils now.
What do you think about the art on that? Just as a slight sidetrack.
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
It reminds me of the scene in Final Fantasy VII where Hojo, Sephiroth, and company find the first big materia.
Okay.
So
I've never played that game.
Mike doesn't know what I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
All you Final Fantasy fanatics out there, unite. I'm a huge Final Fantasy nerd. That's what it reminds me of. I do like the artwork.
It actually kind of reminds me of the artwork for Mox Diamond.
I can see that.
Yeah, with the faceted clear sphere.
That being said, I already have 2 foil Rise of the Eldrazi ones, which are already my favorite because I love that little rainbow in the eye thing. I don't know why. I like it a lot. So I probably will not be buying these in foil, but if I happen to trade into some today, I won't be upset. Or if I happen to open one, and then Mike doesn't want it because Mike hates foils, thankfully.
Let me think. I don't know if I need that for my cube, though.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
Then we got 2 Sprout Swarm.
The most annoying card in the format.
Sprout Swarm is actually one of my favorite cards in the format because it is an example of gorgeously simplistic design.
But it has the too many keywords. It's a spell with 2 keywords.
Well, it has 2 keywords that just work so well together. So Sprout Swarm is 1 and a green. Put a 1/1 green sapling into play. Now the important part is it also has buyback for 3 generic. So for 5 mana, you can every turn just pump out a 1/1.
But now let's get into the good part, Mike. What's the other keyword on Sprout Swarm?
The other keyword is Convoke.
Yeah.
So what you do is you're building out a board of these 1/1s, and then you use them to make more 1/1s by convoking this.
I know. It's basically Baneslayer Angel.
Okay.
It's just a thing with too many keywords on it.
All right. That might be a stretch.
In all honesty, it is a really awesome spell. It's a very unique spell. Sure, there are other convoke spells. We'll get to a few in a second here, but I can't think of another common spell that both convokes and buybacks.
Yeah, Time Spiral as a whole, as a block, was kind of weird, and Future Sight had some very weird and very powerful effects in it.
And this is a very weird and very powerful effect. Also goes into Snowgo, our favorite 5-color control deck,
which we will cover at some point.
Yes, it is a fun deck. But yeah, it is a very interesting card, and a lot of decks like this deck playing 2, it feels good, but a lot of decks will play it as a singleton even.
Yeah, you can play it as a singleton. I've seen some of the lists for what is it called? Midnight Gond. That will run 4 of these as an alternate way to get a bunch of tokens online. Then we've got 4 copies of Keep Watch, the other half of the combo. 2 and a blue, draw a card for each attacking creature. Interestingly, it's not your attacking creatures, so sometimes, if you're really digging for the rest of the combo, you could use this if your opponent has a big board. I don't know. It has other uses. It kind of sometimes winds up in, other sort of control lists that just want to say, all right, time to draw 7.
Yeah. I mean, Keep Watch is a powerful card. It's a very incidental card draw, right? Like you have to do it at the right moment.
Yes.
But the ability to just, basically instant speed, distant melody for less is pretty strong.
That is the other thing. It's an instant.
Yeah, because it's for each attacking creature. It has to be an instant, right?
It's a weirdly powerful effect. Then we got Scatter the Seeds, the other Convoke spell. You want to take this one?
Yep, it's a 5 mana Convoke. I want to say it's an instant even, right?
I believe it is.
Okay, and then you put 3 1/1 Saplings onto the battlefield.
Yeah, so this is just, more ways to make use of your green creatures you've already got.
Yeah, it's just a great Convoke spell, just all in all.
Yeah, 3 power, out of nowhere can be pretty important. Also, just 3 bodies to, chump with can also be important.
So clearly this deck has a problem with Electrickery. But
yeah,
other than that, pretty sweet.
Yeah, it does. Then for, our land base, 14 forests, 1 island, 1 mountain, and 4 copies of Colony Garden. Colony Garden's the ETB tapped land that taps for green, and when it enters the battlefield, you get
you get a dude.
You get an 0/1, an 0/1 plant token.
Which this deck wants to create, that's another Convoke creature. That's another creature for Watch Rites. It's just that this deck is looking to generate as many creatures as it can as quickly as it can.
Definitely. The sideboard on the list that we pulled, I feel, is a little rough. It's one of those 4-4-4-3 sideboards where it's just kind of, broad answers. The sideboard they went with was 3 Dispel, 4 Hydroblast, 4 Druid's Deliverance, which I believe is a fog that populates, and then Sundering Growth, which is a disenchant style effect that populates for 2 hybrid Selesnya mana.
Being a predominantly green deck, I think that's fine. Naturalize is obviously not the best, but this does, get you an incidental dude. I'm not sure how I feel about 3 Dispels and 4 Hydroblasts.
Well, Hydroblast and Dispel both hit Electrickery.
That's true.
Although part of me would rather have a effect such as Spider Silk Armor, the 2 and a green enchantment. All creatures you control get +0/+1 and reach.
You were right about Druid's Deliverance.
It's a fog that populates. Yeah.
Another couple cards that could be seen in the sideboard are Rapid Vigor, regenerate all your creatures.
Yeah.
As well as Magnify, all creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn.
Now, one of the catches with Magnify is it actually hits your opponent's stuff as well.
That is true. But since this is a deck that wants to all-in Alpha Strike and then dump its hand, I don't think Magnify is really that bad. And
That's true.
Magnify is a good answer against like mid-combat Electrickery.
That is true, yeah. The instant speed trick for the trick might actually be worth it. So this is kind of a weird deck. It's somewhere near the green tokens list that occasionally shows up with like Scion of the Wild and stuff like that. And the big difference is it just has this very, very impressive combo finisher. Like it kind of, once you get that Alpha Strike set up, if your opponent doesn't have enough counterspells for you, you're just going to knock them to negatives.
Or if they've tapped
quickly.
out even, yeah.
Yeah. Like this is definitely a deck that preys on sort of tap out control. And, because you're generating all these tokens, you're pretty impervious to, a lot of the edict effects. This deck has a miserable time against teachings, though, because
it's all permission and board wipes. So.
Well, specifically, the board wipe is 2 damage.
Right.
This deck, even with like Spider Silk Armor in the side, it would need to get 2 online to survive Evenkar's Justice, and none of the counter magic in this actually hits Evenkar's Justice.
Right. Dispel and Hydroblast.
Yeah.
So in that case, Magnify might be a good one.
Yeah. And even then, you kind of need double Magnify. I don't know. Like, it's just really
it seems terrible. And then they're like, oh, I'll try and combo you. And they're like, counterspell.
Yeah. So I think maybe this deck doesn't have sideboard slots devoted to teachings because it's just not a matchup you can realistically win.
Right. Also, I mean, even just Seagate Oracle is good against this deck, you know?
Yeah, Seagate Oracle.
Seagate Oracle and continuously bouncing two life gain lands is actually pretty good against this deck.
Yeah, that is a fact. Now, since we've covered most of this deck, the monetary aspect of it is weird. Because this is cheap.
Very, very cheap, actually. Didn't see this number at first.
It's $20 online, and it's $15 in paper. It is cheap. It is kind of a glass cannon. And a decent amount of this deck does not have overlap with a lot of other decks.
I mean, really what we're looking at is Elvish Visionary, Nest Invader, and possibly Sylvan Ranger. But no one's going to play Shadow of the Squirrel. So, I mean, there are some other cards in here. Really, the money card here looks like it's Essence Warden.
Essence Warden and the Hydroblast.
Right. Although I think you don't need to play Hydroblasts in this deck sideboard. I just don't think it's that necessary.
Yeah, I think with some tweaking to the sideboard, this deck could be a lot better. But I don't know. I wouldn't really recommend this as like a pickup for a new player. I would say, maybe if you've got a collection already kind of built and you're looking for something that's a little off the beaten path, then I'd recommend it.
If you're bored of the Delver, Drake, Affinity, Elves meta, then play this.
Yeah.
You're probably also not beating Drake with this deck, though, to be quite frank. Although maybe you won't have to because your deck's going to survive a potential banning and their deck might not.
Yeah.
By the time you listen to this, the ban will have not yet happened. Maybe.
I mean, if people listen to this tonight, the ban will not have happened.
But if it's tomorrow, aka Monday, the banning may have already happened, and you're going to hear from us either way.
Yeah. Some people had actually asked me online if we were going to wait a day just so that we could cover the ban, and I was just like, we
just can't afford to, really.
Yeah.
This is kind of the only time we can do this. So.
Yeah, we definitely like Sunday is the best day.
We'll cover it next week. TAS.
Don't worry about it. We will definitely be talking about it no matter what happens because like it is definitely the elephant in the room. There's no way to get around that.
And no matter, it's so funny, right? Every week we promise we won't talk about Drake. Every week we do. And even after it's banned, we're going to have a segment where we talk about whether or not it was banned.
Yeah.
And if it is banned, we still have to talk about it.
Well, on the bright side, if it does get banned, I can just have our coverage of it can just be, oh, it got banned, and then I can just play air horn noises for like 30 seconds.
I can just make air horn noises like that one.
No, I'd full on go just like, full volume, just drop them into the audio file. Just really hammer home how happy we are.
May play some tag team. Whoop, there it is.
Yeah, just descend into full morning radio hell. But yeah, we will be talking about that next week. Don't worry. We have to cover it. If it doesn't get banned, we'll talk about it. If it gets banned, we'll talk about it. It's kind of unavoidable. But for this week, we're not going to.
We already have.
We've gotten our weekly quota of like Drake content, and we can move on.
Thank you, Michael. Let's go to the maybe board.
Yeah, the maybe board. So this week we got a spicy little number here. Castigate.
It feels so good, but it is a very strong spell.
So let's go with what it does first. So it is a white and a black sorcery. Target player reveals their hand. You choose a card from it, a non-land card from it, and exile that card.
It's pretty strong.
That is a very powerful effect. It's a Thoughtseize styled anything but a land. It exiles. And like that's powerful.
I actually already know a deck that this goes into. So I was playing against this guy on Moto who was playing black white like stuff like Mesmeric Fiend, but then he was playing like Wasteland Strangler. Not Wasteland Strangler. That might be a rare. Mindraker. That's the one. The common.
The Eldrazi.
He was exiling these, and then he was processing them back into my graveyard.
That's interesting.
Well, it was interesting. But then one time he did it. He took my oh god, what is that spell? It's a blue spell. You draw 2 cards. You flash Deep Analysis.
Deep Analysis.
He processed my Deep Analysis, and I was like, All right.
Yeah, I'll take another deep analysis.
I'll take another deep analysis.
Yeah, and this kind of shows up whenever someone makes a black-white deck because, oh my god, this is such a powerful effect.
It is very, very strong. I think the biggest issue is it's hard to get straight up BW sometimes.
Yes. Like, in order for this to be at its best, you have to go, like, either turn 1 basic or turn 1 tap land, turn 2 basic. Like, of the other color.
Yeah, and like, but I mean, the card is just so strong. And I see you have a note here: BW, not so bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst color combination. Both of those colors have very powerful effects in them.
I mean, a deck that plays this could easily play Unmake.
Yes.
Could easily play O-Ring, Journey to Nowhere. These are all cards my opponent was playing in the Eldrazi Pro. I think he could have just done away with the whole processing thing. I think it was a little too gimmicky. But
was this person by any chance playing Skyfishers?
Yes. They would they would process the thing, play Skyfisher, bounce back the Mesmeric Fiend. But this took them like 5 turns to do. So I was like, oh, in response, kill your Mesmeric Fiend.
Yeah, so I've actually played this. There was a while where I was playing around with a black-white kitty list that ran like Pestilence in the main board, and then like Guardian of the Guild Pact. So a bunch of the second tier kind of powerful effects, just to kind of mess around with them. And like sometimes Guardian of the Guild Pact and Pestilence are just a hard lock. Like against, for example, elves, that's very hard for them to get around.
So in black white, like that seems like a good finisher. You have the very grindy Pestilence and Guardian lock, but you're also playing like very strong hand disruption, very strong removal. Your deck probably also had some amount of Chainer's Edicts in it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think I was running like 2 or 3.
Yeah. You're probably also playing cards like other hand hate cards, like maybe not Duress, but
you could definitely play Duress with this. Like Duress to see what they're playing turn 1, and then
Ravenous Rats, perhaps the Ravenous Rats core Skyfisher lock.
I mean, I kind of like this, like where you're going with this a little bit better with blue added into the mix, because Archaeomancer, Ravenous Rats, Ghostly Flicker.
Oh dear sweet God, it's like Saffron Olive's Ratlock deck all over again.
Well, because for a while there was a teachings list running around that ran Chittering Rats, Ghostly Flicker, and either Wall or Archaeomancer.
That sounds like a Nathan special.
So when it gets the lock online, it's very hard for you to deal with it. Like, you really need like instant speed disruption that you can, that
you could somehow draw when the top card of your deck is always the same card, Mike.
Yeah. Like it's hard to get out of, and actually discarding the cards makes it so, it's a little worse against like Tordex or something like that, but it does give you all the time in the world.
So basically this card goes into some sort of black-white X deck that's focusing on locking its opponent out of the game and didn't removing key cards. Like, this is basically Thoughtseize, right? It's the closest thing we have to it in this format.
We also have Distress, which is this, but it discards, and instead of a black and a white, it's 2 black. So there is another.
I actually do know that card.
There's also Coercion, which is 2 and a black.
It's that weird dude surrounded by eyeballs.
There's 2 versions. There's the dude surrounded by eyeballs, and there's a dude with like some sort of like head clamp thing on him that's causing him
some distress.
Some distress, yeah.
Would you say he's under duress as well?
No. You stop that.
You would not say that.
I mean, have you noticed that actually most of the 1 mana discard and 2 mana discard are all Ds? Duress, Distress, Despise,
Z's. You're right.
That was terrible.
Z's, yeah, right up there.
No, it's just
the Inquisition of Kozilek.
Dostricize.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's definitely like very much in the theme of the maybe board, in that it's a gold card that's very powerful, but is limited by its color combination and the fact that it's a 2-drop which requires 2 colors. I
mean, another applicable card that we've done in the maybe board is Terminate, which is unconditional removal but in 2 colors.
Did we do Terminate? I thought we did Blightning.
Maybe we did Blightning. I think we mentioned Terminate. Okay, maybe not. I think we mentioned Terminate.
I think we mentioned Terminate during that because it's another card that as soon as you're in Rakdos,
maybe
you're
next week.
Maybe next week. Yeah.
We'll see. But
yeah, no, it's definitely one of those cards where it's very powerful, just hindered by the fact that it's not in the world's easiest color combo, and it is colored mana intensive.
And this might attract me some enemies on this show, but would you say white is maybe the most underpowered color in the format?
I mean, on its own, like in terms of monocolored decks, I would say yes. Mono white, I think, is weaker than a mono red deck because mono red is very, very aggressive. Mono green has Stompy, mono blue has Delver, mono black has mono black control. I think across the board, white might be the weakest on its own.
But then I'm starting to think, what are some, like, there are no tier 1 decks with a white combination in them.
Right now, sure. If Drake gets banned and we return to a little bit more normal of a meta, Jeskai Kitty is going to be back in tier 1 again.
That's a deck that plays a white card.
Yes, it plays several white cards,
yeah,
in fact.
Does it play several?
Glinthawk and...
I forgot about Glinthawk. All right, you win this. You win this battle.
It usually has, like Core Sanctifiers, Lone Missionary.
You're putting me to sleep over here.
I know.
No, you're right.
Also, like, a consideration for Castigate, the Night Sky Mimic aggro. That thing that, like, shows up every now and then.
We should actually cover that one, maybe, because that one, I think, went 5-0 once.
Yeah, it 5-0s every now and then. So
I forgot about Night Sky Mimic aggro.
It revolves around, like, Night Sky Mimic, which is it's like a 1-2 or something.
I think it's a 2-1.
It's a 2-1 for 1 and then a hybrid Orzhov black-white. And it says, whenever you cast a spell that is both black and white, it becomes a 4/4 with flying until end of turn.
Yeah, that deck's actually really interesting. I definitely want to cover it at some point.
Well, so this is the kind of card that deck runs because, it could run Duress or it could run something that turns on the Night Sky Mimic. And, that deck is always it's a little janky because
that's actually really good, right? Because you castigate them, you take away their removal spell, and then you attack.
Yeah, I mean they could if they've got the mana for it. They removal spell in response.
But, I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like one of those weird kind of fringe decks. I've never actually seen it played like in our local meta, which kind of surprises me because it seems like the kind of thing that appeals to like
couple people.
Yeah, and it definitely has like some very strong lines, like turn 2 Night Sky Mimic into turn 3, like putting I'm going to forget what it is. It's one of the boons from Shadowmoor.
I know which one you're talking about. It's the one that gives lifelink and whatever.
I'm not. No, it doesn't give lifelink.
Yeah, if it's black, it gives it something. If it's white, it gives it something.
If it's black, it gets Unholy Strength. If it's white, it gets Holy Strength. So putting it on a Night Sky Mimic gives it +3/+3. So turn 3 swinging for 7 in the air.
I think I'm just thinking of Nipgwillion, which is another card that deck might run, which just has lifelink.
It's just a 1/1 lifelink for a black or a white. And I don't know. I definitely think that this has its homes, but it's always going to kind of be a maybe board card because black-white just isn't one of the dominant color pairings within this format. So let's sort of shift into discussion mode. So today's discussion is going to focus around sort of building to a better standard of play, and this definitely is more for people who are just getting into the format and may not be super familiar with a lot of these old cards and some of the more interesting interactions with them. And we've talked about some of these on the podcast before, and there was someone, I want to say it was Enrique on Twitter, who contacted us saying that he loves hearing about these. So we're going to devote a little bit of time to, kind of leveling up your play a little bit, not so obvious lines of play. And we're going to start it off at the top with a card that I love to death, Crypt Rats.
It's a good card.
It is. So Crypt Rats is 2 and a black for a 1/1, and then it has X. Crypt Rats deals X damage to each creature and each player. Spend only black mana on X. And the obvious use for this is wrathing the board. But what do you do if they have a creature with Undying?
Or, as a scenario came up with me the other day on Moto, if they have a Circle of Protection black.
Yes, or a regenerating creature. There's all sorts of weird scenarios.
Right.
Also, who was running Circle of Protection Black? Jeez.
I don't know. He's running Rune. He was running all the runes.
Oh, okay.
And then trying to lock me out. But nope, I used this one weird trick, and now he hates me.
I appreciated that comedy. So the thing about Crypt Rats is, before its ability resolves, if you hold priority, you can put it on the stack in different quantities.
Right. And in paper, this is very easy. You just have to say, I hold priority. On Moto, you have to actually hold down the control button on your keyboard while you were paying these costs so that you maintain priority after you should be passing it to your opponent.
So definitely the most common application of this trick is against Stompy, where they have Young Wolf, which is just a 1/1 with Undying. So the thing about Young Wolf is it's going to be a 1/1. If you put 3, so the idea here is you want to hit it twice.
So you have to put
2. So if you put an activation for 2 on the stack,
right,
and then put an activation for 1 on the stack, the activation for 1 is going to resolve first, killing the Young Wolf. Then its Undying ability is going to go on the stack before the second one resolves, and then it's going to get hit for 2. So whenever you're dealing with this, you got to remember you put the bigger one on the stack first,
right? Because
it's going to resolve
last.
Down.
Yeah.
Also, like against regenerating creatures, if they have an X1 that regenerates, you can put the ability on the stack multiple times to either price them into tapping out for regenerating, or just put it on enough where they can't regenerate through all of the different pingings.
And this speaks to another skill, which is just stack mastery. Playing on Moto really, really, really helped me learn how the stack works.
Well, yeah.
So I would, the stack is an indispensable part of Magic, and the more you understand it, the better you'll be at the game.
Yeah, and Crypt Rats is definitely one of those interesting ones because there is like the base level play is figuring out I can wrath the board. The more advanced play is I can deal with creatures that are going to return from the graveyard effectively with 1 card. And the important thing about keeping priority is, how Magic works is if you pass priority to your opponent and they pass priority, the stack starts resolving.
Right.
So with Crypt Rats, after one of its abilities resolves, it's dead.
You can't activate it anymore.
Exactly. So with this one, you really need to maintain priority and, figure it out. Just be like, okay, if I activate it for this much, it kills everything. These things come back, or, this regenerates. How do I have to split this up so that it works the way I want it to? And that's definitely one of those things that it's definitely a level up in terms of strategy.
And in the case of my example, my opponent has a Rune of Protection Black out. They can pay a white mana to prevent a damage from a black source. So what I did is I put the first... My opponent was at like 3 life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I put the first one on the stack and... For one, and then I put the next one on the stack for 1, and then I put the next one. And so it basically comes to a point where my opponent is going to have to activate all of his lands to prevent each one of these 1 damages instead of preventing it all at once.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting sort of situation where you can get around a lot of the downside of that ability in a very, very easy way. Next up, do you want to tackle this next one?
Yeah, sure. Next we have Ninjutsu, which is featured most predominantly in our format on Ninja the Deep Hours, a card in Delver where they can bring it in for 2, and it's a 2/2. I think it's a draw card, but really I should cover what Ninjutsu actually does. Sorry.
Yes.
Ninjutsu is an ability from Kamigawa, one of the Kamigawa sets.
I think it was across all of them.
Okay.
Actually,
where basically after your opponent has declared blockers, you can, for an alternate casting cost that's treated as an ability, put a creature onto the battlefield tapped and attacking by returning another creature to your hand and paying a mana cost.
And notably, that creature has to be unblocked.
Yes, it has to be unblocked. And then generally these creatures will do something once they connect with an opponent. In Ninja the Deep Hours case, it's draw a card. In Okiba Gang Shinobi's case, which is the other ninjutsu card in our format, it will make them discard 2 cards. Yep. So the real key to interacting with this ability is if you...
Well, knowing when it actually can be activated.
Right. It must be in the blocker step. So if you want to kill a creature to prevent ninjutsu, instead of the ninjutsu creature itself, you must kill it in the attack step.
Now, you can also get the there is that period after they activate ninjutsu where you will have priority after the creature's resolved or the ninjutsu ability has resolved.
Mm-hmm.
But with the example of Delver, they're probably bouncing back something with an ETB effect like Spell Stutter Sprite, and you might want the Spell Stutter Sprite dead more than you want to kill a ninja that depowers.
Right.
So that would be a situation where you'd want to kill the first thing, not the ninjutsu thing.
Because on the other side of the coin here, if you are the Delver player and you're attacking, and you get to the blocker step, and then they decide to target your Spell Starter Sprite with removal, you can respond by ninjutsuing it back to your hand.
So this is definitely it's a relatively easy thing to figure out, but it's very interesting because the wording on ninjutsu makes it so it's return an unblocked attacking creature. So you have to hit blockers, so you can't do this during the attacker's phase, which, I've definitely had moments where, I think it was with a Okiba Gang Shinobi, where my opponent tried to play around with creatures during blockers, and I just, ninjutsu'd it out. And, the thing about that is, then they're losing their valid target, right?
Right.
So, you can counter a spell by, your opponent misplaying.
And you actually had a pretty good story once where you ninjutsu to Okiba Gang Shinobi and then ninjutsu to Okiba Gang Shinobi. Right?
It was actually even deeper than that. I was on Pig Trinket, of course. And
it's our favorite deck.
And my opponent tried to interact with me during blockers. And they had already killed one Okiba Gang, and I had one that was attacking, and it was going to be lethal. And during blockers, I think he was on Mono Blue Delver, and he went to snap it. And in response, I Grim Harvested back the other Okiba Gang and ninjutsu'd it in for lethal. So it's definitely a mechanic with a decent amount of play to it. But once you keep in mind that, if you're being attacked by someone you think has ninjutsu creatures or know has ninjutsu creatures, interact during attackers, not during blockers. Simple as that, right?
Right.
Next on our list is kind of a corner case. And it's specifically one deck. It's Delver Fiend. Delver Fiend sometimes runs Shadow Rift, which is a blue target creature gains shadow until end of turn, draw a card.
And I believe it's fallen a little bit out of favor with because there's that one with rebound.
Oh yeah, there are plenty of weird unblockability effects.
Right. This one people play because it draws you a card. It also has a very interesting corner case. If you're attacking in with a pair of Kiln Fiends that will be lethal together but not on their own, you could look at that Shadow Rift and say, oh, this is a dead card. The important thing about Shadow is a creature with Shadow can only block or be blocked by creatures with Shadow. So if your opponent has one creature up for blocks, you Shadow Rift their dude. It can't block. You get in with the two, the 2/4/2 Kiln Fiends or whatever.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of a niche play, but it's not, the most obvious because Shadow Rift looks like something you cast on your own creatures. But every so often, it gets cast on your opponent's stuff.
Most death.
Actually, we could go on to a related example. Vines of the Vastwood. This is...
So on its surface, it looks like it only saves your creatures.
Yeah, Vines of the Vastwood.
But the way that it's worded is that target creature cannot be targeted by spells or abilities your opponents control until end of turn. That is different from Hexproof.
Which is weird because it is the same templating as Hexproof, except it's not the keyword. So it means you, the person casting it, your opponents.
Right. So if you were to cast Vines of the Vastwood, say on a Peregrine Drake, your opponent's Peregrine Drake, as it's being ghostly flickered, the flicker will not happen on the Peregrine Drake.
Yeah, it's a weird card.
It's very counterintuitive.
I've definitely had to explain this to a lot of people at FNM, even in games I'm not playing in, where someone will target their opponent's stuff with vines, and it's just kind of read the card. It looks on its surface like it grants hexproof, but it really, really doesn't.
It does something else. That kind of reminds me of how people always forget in Modern that Arcbound Ravager is a May ability. So, you can target a creature with Arcbound Ravager's ability and they'll pay to redirect it to Spellskite. And I'll be like, okay, I'm not going to give your Spellskite the counters. And they'll look at me like, what? And I'm like, it says May.
Actually, this kind of reminds me of something that might be coming up for people literally as we were recording this. The new mechanic Fabricate actually goes on the stack, and you have this weird moment where if you remove a creature with Fabricate before its Fabricate ability resolves, you don't have to make the choice beforehand.
Interesting.
The choice is made when the ability resolves.
So you can say put Fabricate trigger on the stack, they kill your thing, and you're like, I guess I'll make a dude now.
Exactly. And it definitely makes sense intuitively that Fabricate should be like, all right, put this dude on the stack, Fabricate, putting counters on him. But in reality, it's, I play this dude, Fabricate is on the stack. Do you have any responses? Then you make the choice, which is interesting and has, niche things. You want to talk about Grim Harvest, one of our favorite cards?
Right. So Grim Harvest is a spell for an instant for 1 in the black. You return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. It also has an ability called Recover for 2 in the black, which says whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 2 in the black. If you do, you return Grim Harvest to your hand. If you don't, exile Grim Harvest.
Yep. And this card hates graveyard hate.
Right. So basically, if you have enough mana, what you can do is if someone tries to blow up your graveyard, and you have creatures on the battlefield that you can sacrifice, you can Grim Harvest back a relevant creature from your graveyard, sack something like a Sakura Tribe Elder on the board, and get your Grim Harvest back. And then you have the creature you want and the Grim Harvest, and you've replaced it with a Sakura Tribe Elder or something, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely only applicable to big trinket for the most part. But it is a very interesting play.
Right, because some people will try and do it to get rid of your Grim Harvest or get rid of one of your really good creatures, Muldrifter, or I don't know. I feel I don't know. That's a tough one. I think Muldrifter is probably the biggest target. But being able to get that creature back as well as get your Grim Harvest back is a pretty big game because then you can start rebuilding your graveyard again.
Yes, and you also have the thing that when stuff dies, you'll be able to get it back again. Grim Harvest is very, very difficult to interact with.
Right. I feel because if they counter it, you can just get it back later. You would have to counter it and then exile the graveyard in the same turn in a situation where your opponent can no longer get it back.
Yeah, because it's played alongside creatures that sacrifice themselves so that you can proc the recover ability on demand.
Yeah. It's a very good card.
Next up, more graveyard stuff, weirdly enough. Death Spark. Death Spark is kind of only played in goblins for the most part. It's a weird old card from Alliances. It's 1 red. Death Spark deals 1 damage to target creature or player. But then it has a trigger at the beginning of your upkeep. If a creature card is directly above Death Spark, please remember, graveyard order matters within this format. Don't rearrange your graveyard. But if there's a creature card directly above it, you can pay 1 to return it to your hand. And this card wreaks havoc on Delver decks because a lot of their early threats are X1s. And you can just go wild with this. Now, the catch with it is, in order to get it back, you need a creature directly above it. So what I usually do when I'm playing goblins and I have this card, when something's about to die, that's when I cast it. It's an instant. So, if something's about to die during combat, I'll ping something. It goes to the graveyard. Creature goes to the graveyard on top of it. Pretty simple, but, I've definitely seen people play it differently. Also, interesting interaction. I've seen it in Mardu Tordex lists. And those lists usually have a 1-of Gurmag Angler, and you can kind of cherry pick what you delve. So you can wind up with a creature card on top of it. Just interesting lines.
Gut shot's better.
That's an opinion, sir.
Them's fighting words.
That's an opinion. You want to handle the next one on the list?
Sure. The next one is kind of easy. It's Kyrian Ranger, everyone's favorite elf. But it has such a wide range of applications in the deck the decks it goes into, because what you can do is, at its worst, you can target a creature to untap, not actually untap it, and then return a land to your hand, and then play it again as your land that turn, and then effectively have 2 mana off 1 land.
Yep.
You can also use it to untap Mana Dorks. You can use it to untap Metal Sentinel. You can use it to untap things mid combat. Really, where it shines though is you can use it to untap
Scattershot Archers.
Okay, well, I wasn't going there, but yes, you can use the untapped Scattershot Archers to get more than one activation off of them and kill, 2 or 3 two power flying creatures. But really, it's what's it called? Timber Watch Elf.
Oh yes,
Timber Watch Elf, because you can tap the Timber Watch Elf, give it something plus X plus O or whatever it is, plus X, and then untap it and then do it again to another creature.
Yeah, this is just it's
almost why I would symbiote.
It's definitely a card that would not see print at common today. Like, if this got reprinted, this is definitely, solid uncommon, if not rare territory.
It's a very, very, very strong card. So strong, in fact, that it even goes in a Stompy just that they can hit more land drops to turn on Groundswell.
Turn on Groundswell, and also, that deck's pretty light on land, and sometimes you just need one more mana for your turn. Right. So,
Carrion Ranger is just a very strong card.
Also worth noting, it can be done on your opponent's turn.
Yes.
So,
if you have the extra lands lying around, you can do that.
Yeah. It's definitely it's got a lot of versatility, and learning how to play with this is kind of essential for Elves and Stompy. Just kind of seeing all the different lines that it can take. Next on the list, we've got, when do you counterspell against a Teaching Stick? Because there's a lot of cards that deck plays that you might not want them playing. And generally the accepted sort of answer to this is, if your opponent casts Teachings, most of the time you're looking to counter whatever they got with Teachings.
Well, this goes back to a bigger rule of thumb in Magic as a whole, where you don't counter draw spells unless your opponent has unless it's the last card in your opponent's hand or something.
Yeah. We were talking beforehand, and I brought up the example of, if you're swinging in for lethal and your opponent casts a Teachings, then you counter it.
Right.
Because they're probably looking for a very specific answer that will get them out of lethal. So, right. I don't know. It's you definitely want to save your counters for the spells that actually matter, and draw and tutor spells most of the time are not what you're looking to counter.
Right.
Then we've got, Goblins as a deck has a lot of weird interactions. For example, the interaction between Mog Sledder or Goblin Sledder and Mog Raider, and what is it called? Mog War Marshal. Mog War Marshal, when it enters or leaves the battlefield, it gives you a 1/1 token, and the Sledder and the Raider let you sacrifice things at instant speed to pump something up by +1/+1. You can actually use this just to pop it so that you have the important thing about Mog War Marshal, it has Echo, so you can let it die off the next turn after you cast it. This, however, lets you pop it at on your opponent's turn to maybe save something, and then you also have a Goblin when you untap that isn't summoning sick.
Right.
Goblins is definitely one of those decks where it's got just a lot of small intricacies, playing Sparksmith, which is a creature that taps to deal X damage target creature, where X is the number of goblins you control, and then it deals X to you. You can actually, before using it, pop some stuff with the Sledder so you're not taking as much damage. I don't know. Goblins, I find, is a deck that has a lot of really small micro interactions, and I would love to deck tech it sometime. It's just not a very good deck.
Really?
I don't know. It has it. When the meta is right, it's a good deck. But most of the time, the meta isn't right for that deck.
Right.
I don't know.
What about RDW?
RDW, RDW doesn't have... Red deck wins in our format is just kind of bash in with haste things, for the most part.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I'm just saying it's not very complicated to play.
Right.
There's certain things, it still runs the conscripts and the Goblin Cohort, right?
Yes.
Yeah, those have some, keeping back creatures so you can keep attacking with those is important. Last on the list, the most controversial.
Brainstorm.
How do you brainstorm correctly?
I just don't play the card.
So with Brainstorm, 1 blue, instant, draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library. There are so many ways that you can do this wrong, and a handful where you can do them right. Like, the ideal thing is you want to put back 2 cards that you don't need right now and get rid of them.
Right, via shuffle effect.
Shuffle effect, Thought Scour, and Mental Note do the job as well.
And the problem with our format, like we touched on before, is that all the shuffle effects bring the land in tapped, and so therefore are not as good.
Well, so let me hit you with this. What about Squadron Hawk?
What about Squadron Hawk?
All right. Follow me into Magical Christmas Land.
I mean, I've been there with you before. This example is stupid, but go ahead.
No. You cast a Squadron Hawk, tutor up the other 3. Next turn, you brainstorm, putting back 2 Squadron Hawks. Cast the second Squadron Hawk, tutor up the 2 Squadron Hawks you just put back.
Sure.
I don't know. It turns it a little bit closer to Ancestral Recall.
Yeah, you draw 2 cards for a setup with 2 cards.
Yeah. I don't know. Pauper's a game of inches.
Sure.
You just sound so dissatisfied with this entire discussion about Brainstorm.
I just don't think it's a very good card. The other thing that you brought up earlier, and this is more of a legacy gimmick, is if you get Thought Seized or in our case Duressed or perhaps Castigated, you can brainstorm in response with the cards you don't want to lose back on top of your library.
I definitely got to do this one time at F&M while I was playing Turbo Fog, and I had tutored up, Jace's Erasure, the actual win con of the deck. And my opponent immediately duressed me the next turn. I was like, in response, brainstorm, put back the Erasure because obviously I need my win con to stay intact. And then I revealed my hand to him, and he was like, "Oh, where did?" I was like, "It's on top."
Then he was like, "A response Thought Scour."
That would have been hilarious if he had the Thought Scour. the first time it's ever been targeted against the opponent. Yeah, no. Brainstorm has like that little play that is just kind of an interesting little tidbit. You probably shouldn't be playing Brainstorm. There's a handful of decks that can run it. And outside of that, you just want to play Preordain or Ponder before it, right?
Right.
Kind of, like, I would say in the scheme of, like, blue 1-mana cantrips, it's like, what? Ponder, Preordain, kind of tied.
Yeah, I would say, there are some decks that want Preordain over Ponder.
Yeah. So Ponder and Preordain at the top. Brainstorm probably a little below that. And then, like, Sleight of Hand and Serum Visions all the way at the bottom.
Yes, Sleight of Hand, not very good in our format, I don't think.
Yeah.
About Opt.
I don't want to catch too much heat for this. I'd run Opt before I ran Serum Visions.
All right, sure. What about, Opt. Yeah, sure, Opt.
Oh, also Portent. Bad, the bad Ponder. It's Ponder, but the draw happens on the next upkeep.
That's terrible.
Yeah, no, it's awful. I'm also, though, with Portent, you can do it to your opponent, which is weird.
Intriguing.
Yes.
Intriguing.
So we're coming up on just about an hour here. We've got a pre-release to attend.
Yep.
Fun times. And I'm going to take us out here. That's all we got for today. Thank you to Pat's Games for giving us a place to play almost weekly Pauper because we didn't get to play this week. No hard feelings, though. Thanks to L for the use of his song Quantitative as our theme music. His music can be found on SoundCloud under the name LLL. Remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We're also on iTunes. If you subscribe there, please leave a review, a written one. Doesn't take that long, really helps us out. If you have ideas for discussion topics or deck lists that you want us to feature on the podcast, you can either use the contact form on our website or email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. I'm Michael Petchik.
And I'm Adrian Gonzalez.
Signing off for Color Commentary.